Breaking news at CBS Sports HQ, Sean Payton stepping down as head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Not retiring, but stepping away from the job with 3 more years remaining on his contract. That means that if another team wants Sean Payton to coach them, that team would have to send compensation to the New Orleans Saints to get him. Sean Payton, far and away the greatest coach in Saints history. He's the only coach that led them to the Super Bowl, the only coach that led them to a Super Bowl championship. Began coaching in 2006, won 63% of his games, but stepping away with the Saints kind of in flux right now, needing a quarterback and having cap issues. Let's get Pete Prisco in here. Pete, your reaction to Sean Payton stepping away for now?
Well, there had been rumblings about it, and this was a trying season for Sean Payton in every way, shape, or form. I mean, you started out with the hurricane stuff, you had all the injuries, you have the cap situation, you have the COVID situation, and they didn't play like he expected them to play. I remember he told me in the summer he thought this team, he really liked this team. This was a team he thought could make a playoff push, but with all the injuries and all the COVID situation, it kind of got derailed. So, look, Sean recently was married I think it was a year ago. Maybe he's going to spend time with the family, but I think he's going to coach somewhere else. That's just my gut feeling. I think this is a situation where he looked at the cap room in New Orleans, and it is a mess. There's 70-something million over the cap next year, and you look at the contracts, it's hard to get out of some of those contracts because there is so much dead money that would accelerate into the cap. So it's a real mess. They're going to be challenged like they've never been challenged before, and they've been challenged. Believe me, they've had cap issues before. But I think this might be a ploy for him to go somewhere else. Maybe Dallas, if they were to make a change. Maybe Miami. Maybe it doesn't happen this year. Maybe he sits out for a year and he comes back.
And what would the logistics of a team wanting him to coach there, what would those logistics be, and what would that compensation need to look like, in your opinion?
Well, I think it would need to be a first-round pick, maybe a couple picks. I mean, we've seen the history play out, how that's worked out in some situations. But remember, Bruce Arians walked away when he was with the Arizona Cardinals, and when he went to Tampa Bay, they worked out a compensation for like a 6th-round pick because they didn't want him. I think they swapped the 6 and the 7. They didn't want him coming back. They had already filled the job. So it just depends on how that plays out. But I would imagine if Sean Payton wanted to coach this year, I think it would be a first-round pick and something else to get him. And, you know, you have to sit there and say what team is willing to do that, what team is willing to give up the draft pick compensation to go get him. And he's one of the best coaches in the league. He's one of the best play callers I think this league has ever seen. That's how good he's been calling plays. So he would be worth it for a team. I generally would say don't give away first-round picks. But if you could get him for a late 1, mid 1, then maybe you go do that if you're the Miami Dolphins or another team.
Yeah, you mentioned the Dallas Cowboys, who don't have an opening as of now, but there are people beating that drum to try to replace Mike McCarthy because of how things ended there in Dallas. What would be the best fit, in your opinion, for Sean Payton if he were to coach somewhere else?
Oh, I think Dallas would be a great fit for him. I think, you know, having a ready-made offense with Dak Prescott and those receivers and that offensive line in the running game would be perfect for him. He would be a great addition to that team. He's a great play caller. I think he'd really amp up the offense. Now, Kellen Moore's done some good things with the offense, but Sean Payton, like I said earlier, one of the best who's ever called plays, and he would be great for Dak Prescott and that offense. I think Dallas would be ideal. Hey, you know what? Miami, you sit there and you say, what about the Dolphins? But can he get to play to a higher level? That's to be determined if he were to get the job. I think it'd be a real challenge for him, and I know Sean likes challenges. He's one of those guys that loves to be presented with challenges. That's why he liked this team this year. Nobody thought they'd be any good, and here they were at one point pushing for a playoff berth before all the injuries and all the COVID situations.
We should hear from the New Orleans Saints and Sean Payton at some point today. There is a reported press conference that's going to happen at some point. Where do the Saints go from here, losing the greatest coach in franchise history, losing the greatest quarterback in franchise history 1 year ago, and still not really having a clue what they're going to do at the quarterback position?
You know, you're right. And again, I go back to the cap situation. I mean, it's a mess. I mean, across the board, it is a mess. Mickey Loomis, the general manager, is going to be challenged like he's ever been challenged before to get this right. As far as a coach, look, there's one in the building, Dennis Allen. He's done a great job with that defense, and I think the players respect him. And he's been a head coach before. He might be, the first guy that you talk to in terms of getting that job. If you wanted to go from an offensive standpoint, I think you have to look outside the building. Although Pete Carmichael's been around there for a long time calling plays as the offensive coordinator, I don't think he would be the head coach, but I do think Dennis Allen would get strong consideration.
Pete, you're about to cover, your 32nd consecutive Super Bowl. You covered the one Super Bowl the Saints appeared in and won. Take us back to the pre-Sean Payton days, because this younger generation, I mean, if you're in your 20s, you don't know the Saints as the horrific franchise that they were for so long.
Yeah, but you know what? They had some decent years there. Back in the day when they had the great defense with Jim Mora and Bobby Hebert was the quarterback. They had this pass rush with this Pat Swilling and Ricky Jackson and Sam Mills and Vaughn Johnson, the linebackers. They were outstanding in that situation. So they had some good years, but then it went lean. And what happens is when you don't have a quarterback, and there were always questions about Aaron Brooks. He'd flash and have moments, but then he'd disappear. Even they went to the playoffs. So it was never as bad as way back in the day, but they didn't have any kind of success like you had when you had Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And by the way, the lesson to be learned, get the quarterback, because the quarterback will make all coaches look good.
Yeah, didn't have a quarterback this season, but Sean Payton still was able to beat on the door of the playoffs, 9-8, another winning record for Sean Payton in what might be his last season with the Saints. At least his last season for now. Pete Prisco with us on HQ as Sean Payton decides to step away from coaching the New Orleans Saints with 3 years remaining on his contract. Bryant McFadden, who hinted that this might be coming a little over a week ago, will join us next.